mental health crisis? Do you want to help young people move forward in their lives, like themselves more, understand the world, understand themselves, feel free from emotional turmoil that is plaguing them? Do you want to do something about this crisis? Reverse it, take it the other way, decrease it, help these guys and help these young people feel better. Realize that they are better and more capable and more able and more powerful than they dream that they are right now. So, let me give you a little perspective. As a therapist for 28 years, I've really seen this generation grow up, and I've seen the transformation to a generation who don't trust themselves at all. And I have some unique perspectives about this. I agree with everybody online that social media and having our phones and having screens constantly all the time is a factor. And we don't know, they're just starting to research on our brain from that interaction so often. I mean, hours and hours a day. We have access to it 24/7. And since the pandemic, I mean, people were upwards of 5 hours a day, but since the pandemic, it's exponentially more. So of course we know that there's a connection here to phone use, to screen use, and our mental health crisis that's going on, especially with young people, but with all ages, because we're all getting the same messages. And see, this is what I've come to understand is that we are getting bombarded with messages all day long about our powerlessness, about our worthlessness, about us being out of control. That's the messages that we're getting from our little device 24/7. And it's hard not to believe it when it's coming so often right in our face. And so this is catastrophic on our psyche, because when you think that you're powerless and you get anxiety because you feel helpless, you feel like you can't handle, if anything bad happened, you couldn't handle it, you feel weaker, you feel not right. It feels not right. It feels like something's wrong with you. And then you get in your head that something's wrong with you. That makes it worse, because if something's wrong with you, you have even less power than you did before, right? So it kind of builds like a snowball effect. A snowball effect is like a snowball. If it's going down the hill in snow, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger because it collects from itself. And so this mental health problem is getting worse and worse and worse because we're having experiences from the way we're seeing ourselves that's bringing about more experience and more meaning around it that's the same, and growing this to truth status, right? So we have a truth status that we're unable to, or we are inadequate, because in our culture we have these high standards, these really high unrealistic standards, and we don't even understand them. So we have to reach so high and be perfect in order to be included. Because if we don't meet the standards of our society, then someone's going to kick us out. And that in our human history meant danger, but in our today's world it does not mean danger. Right? To be unaccepted by one person does not mean that your life is in danger. But it did back when, because we're social beings and we had to live in communities, especially before, during hunter gatherer times, because the world was even more dangerous than it is now, if you could believe it. It seems like our world is more dangerous, and there is a lot of horrible stuff going on. Horrible stuff, like it's history keeps repeating itself, and genocides and wars, and just people have been through awful stuff, like going through it now, and we really have to do something about it. But also, we're safer than we've been in human history in many different ways. So we are less needing to use our skills in a daily way to survive. So we're not remembering that we have any skills. So we're getting these messages from our phones saying we're worthless, we're powerless, we're out of control, and I'll explain that in a second. And then for our young people who haven't had, in my generation, so I'm 52, in my generation, we still had some work ethic. We were still taught by our culture to have some work ethic. And so that makes us motivated to do work to get results, right? We learned cause and effect. We had to do something if we wanted those results. Marketing campaigns, if today, the last 50 years, marketing campaigns on devices or on screens have really focused on, you don't have to do anything, you just get to buy it because you're cool. It's cool. You're cool. You need it. You deserve it. And they really want to bypass that whole cause and effect. And we are bombarded with these commercials constantly, and thinking that, well, we don't get everything we want. We don't get to buy everything because we do have a limited amount of money, and some don't have much money at all to buy those kind of things that we probably don't even need. But we don't understand why, because the message is that we should be able to, and we're not. And people are concluding that that means that they're unworthy. And if you've never heard my theory about this, get ready to have your mind blown, because this is hugely effective on our youth mental health crisis and a huge factor in causing and increasing our youth mental health crisis. The messages that they're getting constantly, that they should just get stuff just because they deserve it. And when it doesn't happen, it's confusing because it's a truth that they should, because the message comes so constantly. It's doing huge damage on our psyche because we're confused, and we have to conclude the why that's not happening, why we're different, because this is the truth. Everyone gets this because we deserve it, and it's awesome. And so the only thing we conclude is there's something wrong with us, or we're unworthy somehow. And this is subconscious, because if it was conscious, we'd be like, that has nothing to do with us. But it's happening on this subconscious level because the commercials are happening on this subconscious level. Incredibly powerful. That's one thing. I've also identified, the fact that we see traumatic events from very far away all the time. They seem random, they seem out of control, they make us feel incredibly vulnerable. So we're seeing this trauma, this horrible things happening in the world, but we're helpless on our couch, not being able to do anything, and that helplessness increases our feelings of powerless and worthless and out of control. We have to decide to take some kind of action. And if we can't for whatever we're seeing on there, we got to do it for our little corner of the world. Because if we sit in that helplessness, our anxiety is going to go up, our depression is going to go up, our view of ourself is going to go down. And that's just going to increase the depression and anxiety and the feeling of out of control. And when we're out of control, when we're feeling out of control, we're trying to grab for control somewhere. So kids are hurting themselves. They are at all ages too. Like, I'm not trying to say just young people, but this youth mental health crisis is extreme because this is kind of the only thing they've known. And if they've had some trauma, we've had collective trauma right now. And so we've definitely all been through trauma. It's worse. So with this, with youth and how to understand what's going on for them, is that that's all that they know, is like seeing this secondary trauma or being secondarily traumatized by witnessing horrible traumatic events from all over the world, and feeling more and more helpless about that, and more vulnerable about that. So then we're trying to grasp for control because it feels so out of control. So maybe we're bullying, or we get in relationships where we're being bullied because we're trying to save them, or change their ways, or make them love us, right? We get into these other um, not good coping skills to try to get that power back. So we might have eating issues, we might be overworking, we might be underachieving, like having no motivation, like what's the use, I'm going to fail anyway, kind of no motivation. Maybe we're having a lot of sex, or withdrawing altogether because we're so sensitive that when we are in public or we're around groups, it's overwhelming. Or maybe we're just more and more afraid to go out. That happens so much. Most people who are experiencing anxiety or depression or any kind of emotional turmoil think that they're the only ones, because it's invisible and everyone else looks fine. But I have to tell you, not everybody is fine. People are struggling just like you are. And actually, you're doing better than you think you are. You actually have more skills than you think you do. And in what our job is as the adults in the world who are trying to support this Generation Z, the adults in the world have to reflect back and show them their unique skills. Because they're not doing chores all the time, because they're not using their skills to survive. Actually, when people are depressed or anxious, or they their parents like take things off their plate to try to ease some of their stress. Right? You're validating that they can't. You're validating that they're struggling and that they're not okay. That is a big deal and not necessarily helpful, is it? To them, it makes them feel less than, and it confirms their truth that they think is true. That's not true. That they have a problem. They're unworthy or they're inadequate. And so we, as the adults in the life of these young people, have to show them the amazingness that they are. We have to remind them that the skills that they have. And if they're like, I really have no skills, listen, our brain developed for 2 million years as humans. That's there. Like our ability to problem solve evolved into our brains. They have it. They absolutely have it. But they're using it less because they think that they can't. So they use it less. So they're less and less reminded that they can do something. So kids have to do hard things. We have to challenge ourselves constantly and get used to that, like integrate what it's like to do something hard so you could build that trust in yourself. One activity I did when I was trying to heal myself and build that self trust is every night I did write down gratitude. Tons of research says gratitude journals are absolutely life changing, and they help us become happier, become more joyful, see good in the world, and make different choices from that transformation. But I added to this practice writing down 3 things that I did that day, because our deficit mentality, our world right now, the way our culture is teaching us to be, we see our deficits and they're like beacons for our attention. We forget to see how amazing that we are. Now, we don't forget to see it. We just don't see it because these other things are just so shiny. And we have all kinds of evidence of all our failures that this is the truth. We're doing stuff every day that's amazing. That counters those problems, that really stands against those problems all the time, but we're not noticing it. And when we don't notice it, we have less and less access to it. And that access to it is what's going to help us overcome our anxiety and depression. What's going to help young people with this crisis, with this mental health crisis, overcome their anxiety and depression and those behaviors that those things cause that hurt them, right? And cause even more trauma and cause even more mental health problems. So we have to remind them and show them how amazing that they are. We have to believe in them that they could do things that they don't think they could do, so they could see it and begin to trust themselves. Oh, I was telling you about the practice. So write down 3 things that you're grateful for, then write down 3 things that you did that day so that you could start to see the skills. So you're retraining yourself instead of seeing your deficits to see what you did do. So often what we do is we have this huge to-do list. I'm right there. This huge to-do list. And we're so overwhelmed, like, oh, we have all this to do. How are we going to do it? We have all this to do, we have all this to do, we have all this to do. And it's like when we get to doing it, it's like we did it like 3 times already because we thought about it so much. And when we do one thing, instead of celebrating that thing that we did do, we think, oh, I have so much more. I have so much more. We're so focused on the deficits, what we haven't done, that we don't even celebrate that thing that we did do. That is a huge mistake. I started celebrating the thing that I did do. And then you start to think you're amazing, because it is amazing. Like everything that we do, given the state of the world, given the state of our hearts right now, given this mental health crisis that is its own animal and is taking over our young people, they're suffering so badly. So if we could change that, don't we want to? Yes, we need to. We know we need to. These kids are hurting. They're doing things that hurt them, substance abuse or some other vices or anything that hurts them is even more damaging, breaks our heart. um, Sometimes we're losing kids to suicide. We need to do something to understand this youth mental health crisis, to change it, to better their lives, to show them that they are so much better than they think they are and so much more skilled than they think they are. And that is going to change everything. I made a mental health curriculum for high school health teachers. So if you know a high school health teacher, tell them about my Compass curriculum program. Comment, write to me, send me an email, come on over on my website, jodiema.com, and learn more about that, because we need to get this education into kids' schools, because they need it where they are. They need to understand mental health. They need to understand the crisis and what to do to get out of it where they are right now. So you're going to help me do that. And if you want more information, if you like this, I'm on every Monday night at 8 p.m. The Therapist Mom Show. That's my live show on Monday nights at 8 p.m. You can come on over to my YouTube channel or my website, jodiema.com/therapistmom. And if you want more, watch this video next. See you next week. Taking a while to get this out. Nope. On one. Here we go.